This is a debrief of Task 2 from Sample Assessment 2 of Applied Management Accounting. X Limited has decided to move to a more efficient inventory holding system for a new range of products. The new system will reduce the standard amount of wastage from 10% to 5% and will also result in a permanent saving of 10,000 from a reduction in the level of inventory held. For the 4 months from April to July, X Limited had forecast that they would produce a total of 17,100 units, with each costing 2 kilograms, excluding wastage. Each kilogram would cost $2.25, and all purchases are paid for immediately. The raw material used in the new range is not used in X Limited's other products and is currently in short supply due to production constraints by the only supplier of this raw material. So we need to calculate the following items included in X Limited's budget, and we need to put our answers to the nearest whole number. So remember that these numbers are going to be marked by the computer in your assessment, so you need to make sure that you follow the rules there. If you use any decimal points, then the computer will just think you're wrong. So what we need to do then is compare the current system with the new system. And the first one is to work out the total amount of kilograms required for production, excluding wastage. Okay, so we've got a plan to make 17,100 units, and that's going to require 2 kilograms per unit, and that's going to give us a total of 34,200 kilograms. So notice in my workings here, I'm putting units in kilograms because we notice that when people don't do that, if they just have a load of numbers on their scrap paper, people can get really confused. But if you show that, okay, this is a unit, this is a kilogram, this is a litre, this is a pound, then it will help you to work out what number is what, and hopefully you'll be less confused. So we can see therefore that under both systems, we'll need 34,200 kilograms. Then it's also asking us, well, what's the number of kilograms wasted? Well, let's look at the information again very carefully. It says that we're going to make 17,100 units, with each using 2 kilograms excluding the waste. So that means that we will actually consume more than the 2 kilograms because some of it is going to be wasted through the process of production. So under our current system, it tells us that at the moment that 10% of our kilograms is wasted. So we know that the 34,200 is the amount of kilograms in the final product, but this must represent 90% of the input because 10% is wasted. So if the 34,200 represents 90%, if we divide by 90%, it means that, okay, remember this is the output, so our input must be 38,000. And we can see that the difference, the waste, is the difference between the two, which is 3,800. Now, what about under the new system? What's that going to be? So our output is still going to be the 34,200, but now only 5% of our input is wasted. So that means the output represents 95% of the input. So if we take the 34,200 and divide by 95%, that means that our input must be 36,000, and therefore our waste is 1,800. So we can put those numbers into our answer. So the amount of waste is 3,800 under the existing system, and that will fall to 1,800 under the new system. Now, in a moment, we'll come back to how would you do this if it said this was including wastage. But let's finish this question off first before we revise that area. So then tells us, well, what's the total cost of this going to be? So our total cost, well, our total cost is going to be based on the input, isn't it? So we're going to take the 38,000 multiplied by the £2.25, and that's going to give us a cost of 85,500. Whereas under the new system, we'll have the 36,000 input multiplied by the 225, and that's going to cost us 81,000. So what's our total saving going to be? Well, if we compare the two of these, so that's going to be 4,500. But remember, we've also got a saving of 10,000 because we're just holding less inventory over the period. So our total saving is going to be 14,500. Okay, well, what if the question said that we needed 2 kilograms including the wastage? Well, in that case, remember we have our 17,100 units and they're going to consume 2 kilograms each. So that means that the 34,200 is now going to be the input because that includes the waste. So that means if we have our input, which is the 34,200, but we know that 10% of that is wasted. So that means our waste would be 3,420, and therefore our output is the difference. So we'd have 30,780 included in our finished goods. Whereas under the new system, our input's still going to be the 34,200, but now our waste is only 5% of that. So 34,200 times by 5% gives 1,710, and therefore our output, we're going to have more kilograms in our output now, aren't we? So we're going to have better quality output. So our output is 32,490. So remember, this here is 10% and here it's 5%. Yeah, so we can see the two different ways of doing this depending on the wording in the question. So it's really important that you read the question very carefully. Then in part B of the task, it asks us to discuss the factors that could affect the reliability of the forecast saving calculated. So it's asking us, how reliable is that number? Yeah, we've got that 14,500. Are we happy with it? So what are the factors that could affect the reliability of it? Well, look at all the numbers that we've used to do the calculation. If any of these is incorrect, that means our total saving is going to be incorrect as well, isn't it? So it could be that our waste percentage may not be correct. So it tells us that at the moment we've got 10%. So that's a hopefully an accurate figure because we can use our current observations. But we are predicting, aren't we, that we're going to have improved wastage down 5%. So that number may not be correct, and therefore our savings may not be correct. We've also identified this 10,000, haven't we? That is a number that we don't know is accurate. Again, it's quite a round figure number, isn't it? So that may not be correct. We may have a different number of savings for that. Also, we're assuming what our future production is going to be of 17,100. Well, that may not be correct. So again, we have to rely on perhaps what our sales colleagues are telling us. We're also assuming that we need 2 kilograms per output of unit. Well, hopefully that's pretty good as an estimate, but it may not be. Again, our production process may be variable, and actually we may have a little bit more, or a little bit less for each item we produce. We're also making an assumption about how much it costs per unit. Well, again, that's a future assumption. We don't know how much it costs. We may have a contract with our supplier for that, but that may be affected by inflation in the future. And we're also told that at the moment our supply is in short supply because we only have one supplier. So it could be that we may not even be able to get all the kilograms that we need. So we won't make a full 14,500 savings if we can only make half of the product because we just don't have enough materials to make everything that we want to. So notice the technique here, that the numbers in the question helped us to discuss what factors may affect that final calculation. Right, let's move on to the next two parts of the task. X Limited is about to launch a new product in March. This product is unlike the existing products sold by the company. In order to generate initial sales volumes, X Limited is considering changing its credit terms for this product and undertaking a significant promotional campaign. X Limited is unsure of the precise effect these changes will have on sales volumes, but has budgeted for sales income of £220,000 in the first 3 months. Currently, the business gives 30 days credit, but is looking to increase this to 60 days. It is anticipated that irrecoverable debts would increase from the current 5% to 8% if credit terms were extended. The promotional campaign, which will be the first for the company, will involve extensive product placement adverts across 2 main social media sites over a 2-week period. So notice we've got quite a lot of information here about the business. There are some numbers included in the text as well, which we'll need to consider. So for part C of the task, it asks us to identify the stages and features of the product life cycle, and there are 4 marks available for that. So here's the product life cycle diagram that we have in our learning materials. And notice that there are 5 stages, so that's more than the 4 marks that have been awarded for this part of the question. And sometimes you even see this with 6 stages. But anyway, so let's have a look at the 5 stages we've got here. So typically at the beginning, we're going to be starting off with developing the product. And in this case, we would expect to see lots of cash outflows and no income. So we're just spending money on doing some research, creating prototypes, and trying to make sure that this product will meet the expectations of the marketplace. After development, we will launch the product. So this is where we're going to need to use our extensive product placement and on our social media to try and tell everybody that we have this new product. So we're not going to have very many sales to begin with because our product will still be relatively unknown. And remember, in this question, it tells us that the product is unlike the existing product, so it's very new to our existing customers as well. So we need to spend a lot of money to get some share of people's mind here and to just be aware of the product. So we wouldn't expect very many sales in this period, and so we need to have low income in our budget, but still quite a lot of costs because we're spending so much money on advertising. So typically this is a loss-making period. The next stage then is that we have our growth. So this is where people are starting to be aware of our product and they're starting to buy it. And if they like it, they buy more of it, they tell their friends, and then we get more and more sales. But we also need to be aware that because of that growth, our competitors may be watching us and thinking, oh, we like this product, we should sell it as well. So they may also be entering the market. So there's typically quite a high level of competition in the growth phase because we're trying to sell our product and increase our market share, but competitors notice this and they're coming into the market as well. Then we have our maturity phase, and this is where we're not really selling many more items, but this is when we might see a reduction in competition because we may have a good market share here and the competitors who are late to the market haven't really been able to get a good position. So this is where they may abandon the product and just let us get on with it. So at this stage now, we probably have quite a lot of money coming in. Hopefully with our greater share of the market, we can just keep on selling to our existing customers and possibly selling to new customers as well. But because we're not spending a huge amount of money on trying to tell everybody about our product, then perhaps our costs are a bit lower here, and this is a high profit-making stage. But we're just recognizing that we're not selling many more than we used to. So we can see from the shape of the graph that our sales are starting to tail off. We're just collecting in lots of cash from our customers, but not necessarily getting new customers. Possibly there are other products that are starting to come into the market that may be a replacement for ours. And then finally we get into the decline stage, and this is where we are starting to lose sales, again potentially because other products are starting to replace ours with much more frequency, and possibly it could be our own product. It could be that we've already started the development and launch for a replacement product, and then that's the idea of our product life cycle, that we want to have multiple products all at different stages of the life cycle, so that any products at maturity generating lots of cash are helping to pay for the development, and when something goes into decline, we're ready to launch our replacement. So if we can coordinate our products using this life cycle, then we'll always be in a good position for replacing our products. So in this decline phase then, so it could be that we have some excessive inventories that we want to get rid of, so we might start to reduce the price. It could be that we're not selling any new things really, but we are just supporting our existing customers. So we may be making losses in the decline phase, but we're not going to completely abandon the product, because that may upset our customers who want to get support or want to get spare parts. So we will carry on supporting them for the sort of long-term goodwill. And then in part D of the task, it asks us to evaluate the expected impact of, again, both the change to the credit terms and the planned promotional campaign. So of the 6 marks available, we would expect there to be around 3 marks for the change in credit terms and around 3 marks for the planned promotional campaign, but not necessarily exactly 3 of each. So if you say a little bit more for one and a little bit less for the other, then that's probably still going to be getting you a good score. The question is asking us to evaluate. So what does that mean? Well, we need some sort of opinion for this. So it's quite likely that we need to identify what are the positive impacts, what are the negative impacts, and then we need some sort of conclusion or opinion at the end of it. And for the 6 marks that are available, potentially there will be a cap on the marks that you get if you have no conclusion. So overall, you need to say that it will be a good thing or a bad thing based on the information they've given us. So let's start with the planned promotional campaign, because that's what we've been talking about when we talked about the product life cycle. So remember, they're going to be using product placement adverts and using their social media for a 2-week period. Remember that the business has budgeted that sales income will be 220,000 in the first 3 months, and we need to evaluate whether or not we think this promotional campaign will genuinely contribute towards that. So I think we need to recognise that this is the first time they've done that promotional campaign, so it's going to be difficult for them to predict the outcome of it. Based on the 2-week period, that seems quite a short period to try and launch a new product, so that needs to be questioned as well. And also their media, they're going to be using their social media sites to promote their product, but it seems that X Limited is selling to businesses. They give them some credit. And so do businesses tend to buy things based on social media adverts or through other means? So it might be that individual customers might spot things on social media and buy things, but not necessarily that's how businesses procure things. So I think we need to question whether the medium they're using is appropriate. So notice how we're giving some sort of opinion for each of these 3 comments. Okay, mostly they seem to be quite negative, don't they, rather than positive. But yeah, the overall conclusion, I think, is that we're not sure this is going to be effective. Right, what about the change to the credit terms? So in this case, yeah, they want to increase the credit limit from 30 days to 60 days. So there's a positive thing here, because if we have 60 days to pay, that's quite attractive, and that may encourage people to buy our product. So that sounds like a positive thing. But we need to be skeptical that that may have no effect at all. If the product is not very good, just giving someone 60 days to pay for it isn't necessarily going to get them to buy it in the first place. The text also tells us that they think there's going to be an increase in the bad debts from 5% to 8%, and that may be an acceptable cost for creating the sales in the first place, but that needs to be evaluated. We also need to be aware that it's going to have a negative effect on our cash flows, isn't it? So even though we're going to have income of 220,000 in the first 3 months, quite a lot of that is going to be received after those 3 months. So yeah, there's going to be a negative impact on cash flow. So in this case, it's a bit more difficult to try and evaluate whether or not this would have a positive impact on the business. So potentially it may do, but there are some negative impacts as a result of it.